Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Committee. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll start the meeting because it's 1:30 now, and we'll go through the agenda. But before we start, I have to read the announcement. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you have deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded, and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds and the premises must be evacuated immediately, do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use the microphone when speaking, and those guest members who are here today who are coming to speak, we will explain how that works. That's the introduction. Just that we've got a lot of guests today, or members of the public, some of you may never have been to a planning meeting before. Trust me, it's riveting stuff. But in order to familiarise yourself with the room, because there's lots of people in here, my name's Chris Mitchell. I'm the chairman of planning. Down the right and left, and at the end you have the other councillors who make up the planning committee. At the end, at the top, we have some of the senior officers, and Duncan in particular, who's our head of planning, and George, who's our legal advisor. We have a couple of other officers on the side. Margaret's the real boss who's running around. She keeps us all in check. And then, of course, we have yourselves at the back. And there's an opportunity for those people who have asked to speak to the committee today. So if I just go through the agenda in turn. Margaret, do we have any substitutes?
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Aladitta for Councillor Shafaz-Ditta. Thank you. Thank you.
Any declarations of interest? Excellent. Suddenly miraculously fixed, Councillor Amos.
Well, I just looked at... Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, man of your wisdom and intellect, I mean...
not mine, Councillor Roberts, but anyway,
it's just to say, Mr. Chairman, on item... get the right number. Here we are. Item 8, 177 Malvern Road. I have had a conversation with Mr. O'Hara, although it's principally in relation to unauthorised working on site, and I did advise him about his right to come to committee to object, but that was done via Margaret Johnson.
Okay, thank you very much. We now go to the minutes of... Oh, sorry, Pat, I do apologise, and Karen as well, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Item 14, the objector is on holiday and the person who was to have spoken is not here. So what I will try to do is represent what that is. So I shall speak as the...
Thank you very much. And Karen.
Thank you, Chair. With the application for it's the application has taken a long time to get here. I haven't met, but an officer to.
Thank you very much for the clarification. We then go through the minutes of the last planning meeting. Are there any comments on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, in which case I shall sign those minutes as a true reflection of that meeting. Thank you very much. Minutes of the Conservation Panel. Any comments on those minutes? No? Excellent. So we'll accept those. We are having no site visits today. Any public participation, Margaret?
No public participation, Chair.
And public representation, I know we have two speakers, Mr O'Hara and Mr Turan on agenda item 8, and then a Mr Stagg and Mr Coyle and Carroll on agenda item 9. So we'll hear those in their due course. So in which case, we'll move directly on to agenda item 8, which is 177 Malvern Road.
So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, on a point of order, I wouldn't normally, but I think the report is inaccurate and therefore could be misleading. It says on paragraph 6.1, no representations have been received to this application, but I've received a letter of objection from 157 Malvern Road, which I think has been in the late paper, so that's not accurate, is it?
Thank you. I'm assuming the report was written prior to that objection being received, Councillor Amos, but thanks for bringing it to the committee's attention. Thank you. So, in which case, Andrew, you presenting?
Thank you. This is an application for various alterations. I'll just get the technology to work. If I start the presentation and just ask Margaret to move us through the slides, is that okay? Yeah. Sorry, Margaret, go straight on to the next slide, please. Yep. All right. So you can see the extent of the proposed works. So it's the demolition of a carport, erection of single-storey upward extension above existing chalet bungalow to create two-storey house alongside two-storey rear extension, including a Juliet balcony and associated fenestration changes. This is part retrospective. As you can see from paragraph 2.1, an enforcement case was set up. That was received beginning of April, on the 8th of April. We then received a non-material minor amendment for as-built proposals, and then a further application which was also withdrawn, which was for, again, the non-material amendments were considered too significant to do as a non-material amendment. So an application was then submitted. We said that those changes were unacceptable, and so that was withdrawn. And what we have before us today is the application for alterations to what has been built in effect. So you can see there on the screen the red line plan. Next slide, please. This is the view from the front of the house, from the street scene. Next slide, please. And you can see, again, work under construction, front of the house, minus, obviously, as we move into the house. And this is a view from the rear. As you can see, there is a proposed balcony. Oh. There we go. And as you can see there in alterations on that. And again, this is the view to the next door property, 175. Windows, some of these have been approved and with obscure glazing. I'll show you, that's the view out of the long window, so you can see that it's obscured. This is the view from the balcony. Now, the balcony does not form part of the proposals, so it's important not, but obviously the first floor extension would go on top of this balcony, and this was part of the negotiated position. And again, the reason why is because obviously the view from the balcony, you can look directly into the next door's property. So the application includes parking revisions to the parking layouts, and again, you saw some of those have already been implemented because they're in part already have been approved. So this was what originally stood on the site, and before the range of extensions have been approved. These were the approved plans in 2018, and you can see there that they were also going into a loft conversion, which is no longer being proposed, and extensions. And again, you can see as built, this was the section, what we call the Section 73 amendment application, which was withdrawn. And then the current proposed extensions in effect to get rid of the proposed balcony. The proposed floor plans show as you would expect, obviously bedrooms on the first floor and ground floor living accommodation. So it's important to just kind of, as I say, just do a comparison, I think, from where we've come from over the course of history. So top left is the originally approved extensions in 2018. Then we moved down to amended, again in 2018, amended applications extensions. And then top right, we go to as built, and top, which is not proposed now, but bottom right is what is now proposed. And we compare and contrast that, those extensions with obviously what has been built. As I say, the report has been gone through. Councillor Amos kindly did one of my updates, which was that there has been a letter of objection. Apologies, we should have put it in the late paper. The objection reads from the neighbour that they have no objections to the proposed extensions as proposed now, providing the balcony obviously goes, but raise concerns with regard to the capacity of the drainage to cope with numbers 175 and 177 Malvern Road. Obviously, this is a civil matter between Severn Trent and the owners of both 177 and 175. And if a further connection is required under the Water Industry Act, that would be for Severn Trent to organise and arrange if they get continual blockages. Again, that is, so in effect, we note what the objection letter is saying. But as I say, it is available to publicly view on the website. Apologies for not putting that on the website. So, as I say, this brings, hopefully, a few months of full applications to a close, and we are recommending approval for the extensions as proposed. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Andrew. Before we start and open it to debate, I'll just hopefully close one point. We all know, as members of the planning committee, we get frustrated when people either build without planning permission or abuse the planning permission they've had. It's good to see that officers have got involved with enforcement and have rectified that. So I thought I'd make that comment now, so we don't spend a long time saying it's annoying, because we all know it's annoying and it shouldn't happen. The officers have got in and rectified that straight away. So we'll put that on record. But we now open this agenda item to public debate. Oh, I apologise. Well, I forget. Having mentioned we had speakers, I now need to call them to the table. I do apologise. We've got Mr. O'Hara and Mr. Turan. So if you'd like to come, we can only get. We'll have the objector first, because we've got limited space, and then once you've had your opportunity to speak, you get 5 minutes. Then we'll swap you out, and we'll have the applicant in. So, Mr. O'Hara. Mr. O'Hara, you get 5 minutes. George on my right here will wave at you when you get to 4.5 minutes. This young lady here on my right. When you get to 4.5 minutes, and then we will wrap you up at 5, so you need to keep to. Please take a seat.
Well finished by then.
Yeah.
Right, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kevin O'Hara, and I live 2 doors down from the development at 177 Malvern Road. I've lived there with my wife for about 27 years. The first approved planning application in 2018 for the single bungalow to become a 2-storey dwelling, we had no objection to. The balcony planned on the south side also encompassed a large lantern roof, and so it would not have been suitable for any kind of entertainment. We did, however, object to the application to gain retrospective planning for works that have been completed in contravention of the planning permissions that have been granted. And the reason for this objection was that a very large balcony, which you've seen, being constructed on the north side of the house, that bore no relation to the approved plans, and that balcony currently almost completely overlooks our rear garden and parts of the house. If this current application is approved and the required works are carried out by the house owner in a compliant and timely manner, then the balcony will disappear and the reason to object will no longer exist. And thank you for listening to me.
Mr. O'Hara, thank you very much for taking the time to come speak. Oh, Mr. O'Hara, please stay. You get an opportunity now. Some members of the committee may have some questions for you. No, I should have explained that earlier. But thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us. Does anyone have any questions? I've got Pat.
Thank you. I think what I need to do is rephrase perhaps what you said, Chair. Mr. O'Hara, it's probable that you may not know how planning regulations always operate. When someone builds something that they shouldn't for whatever reason, we do send enforcement officers out to have a look at it when we receive information about it. But when an application comes in, what we're seeking to do here is regularize it and frame it within planning rules to see whether or not we can approve it. So they may or may not have to alter something, but that's what the purpose of, I hope you understand that's what the purpose of the application is. Is that okay? Yes, you understand that. That's all I needed to know.
No, thank you, Pat. Any other questions? I've got Councillor Amos.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. O'Hara, if it is built, as you say, as a proposed permission, then you would be happy with it? Because just a quick follow-up. My understanding was that when you raised the issue of unauthorised development before, unauthorised working before, it appeared that work speeded up to try and, even though enforcement was looking at it. So clearly, you would have concerns, would you not? And I hope they're unfounded. That the planning permission, if approved, would be adhered to without any nonsense.
Year or the year after, decade hence, yes.
I'm just going to get Mr. Rudge to provide some clarification on the time limit that's allowed to take. Duncan.
Sorry about that, members. Through you, Chair. If in a moment you decide to support the application, then that does move matters forward to a certain extent. However, there is no guarantee that a planning permission that's granted gets implemented. Leaves the council with a dilemma. If you grant this application this afternoon, then we would expect the applicants to us, reassure us as far as the timescale within which they intend to carry out this development. And if we judge that to be an acceptable timescale, then we'll monitor the site very carefully. If their suggested timescale isn't satisfactory and we feel that it's too long, then we will need to consider whether we serve an enforcement notice that draws a line in the sand and establishes the council's position, so that what you have seen constructed doesn't become lawful simply through the passage of time, because there is an all-important 4-year rule as far as planning enforcement is concerned. Now, if the applicant or their agent doesn't write to us within the next week or so, then we'll be writing to them.
Thank you, Duncan, and I hope that's reassuring to you. Yes. And can I just say, all the members in the committee should take a leaf out of your book, because that is the most succinct and articulate briefing we've had for quite a long time, and members could learn from you, because we like to ramble on a little bit. But anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Hara. I now call Mr. Abdul Turan. Mr. Turan, thank you. Again, Mr. Turan, if you press the button on the right, red light comes on, you get 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes. George will wave a hand at you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for everybody, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the planning department for supporting us in sorting out this problem. I just want to confirm to everybody that this wasn't my intention. I do understand that we should not build against plans, but as I mentioned in my application, between 2018 and 2021, COVID has hit me with about £100,000 more than the expected cost. I had to scale down the project. I didn't extend, I scaled down. And scaling down, I thought that I'm not adding any new feature to the design, because we already had got planning permission for a bigger balcony, which can overlook even far more than the current one. But when I received the objections of the neighbors, honestly, I didn't want cause any problems. So I went to and talked directly to number 175 and number 179, who are directly impacted by it. I said, look, I'm here not to cause problems. I'm here just because I have the right to develop my property. And I proposed that I do not want the balcony anymore. And in collaboration with the planning officers, I submitted the final application saying that there will be no balcony. I have a very good relationship with 7579, and I showed them that if there is any problem with the sewage, although it is a matter for Severn Trent, we can sort it out. And for the last 5 years, I think we had only one blockage, which was a small thing, and Severn Trent sorted it out. And maybe because the previous owners, they didn't clean the manhole for ages. For the concerns of my neighbor 173, I am not intending to spend the rest of my life in a construction site. Actually, I decided to scale down to finish the project within my means. I thought I do not want to go extreme with the plans of 118 and end up with a construction site for the rest of my life, or maybe leave an ugly building for the neighbors. So I scaled it down, and I managed to finish it from outside. From inside, I haven't. And now I need to further confirm that I will finish it as soon as possible, subject to just getting it done. Very much.
Yeah, Mr. Turan, thank you very much for taking the time to come to speak to us today and keeping it succinct. Any questions from any members of the committee? It's reassuring to hear that you're going to complete it as soon as you possibly can, but I've got Owen, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick one. In your opinion, what is your projected timeline for this work?
I was hoping to sort it out this summer, because actually I've been, as Duncan mentioned, maybe we've been now for 3 months in this discussion to get it sorted out. Now, I am an academic at the university, and the academic year starts in a matter of 2 weeks' time, and the weather isn't supportive. So most likely it will be done by spring or next summer.
Any other questions for Mr. Turan? Thank you very much. If you just turn your mic off before you sit back down. Lovely, thank you. I now open the matter for debate amongst the committee. Anyone wish to speak on that? I've got Councillor Amos.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, it's good news that the resident who did object doesn't, so that's very helpful. But I've just got two other issues perhaps the officers could clarify. So now, having read the letter from the owner, of 175 Malvern Road. I am concerned because it's talking about discharging sewage and rainwater, which up to now has occasionally, it says, been blocked. And of course, 177 is when it was a bungalow, it was blocked. Obviously, the new works are considerable, with extra rooms and extra people living there. So it is more than likely, well, I think it's almost certainly going to happen, that the blockages that have occurred are going to increase in frequency and scale. Now, I know the officer has said, well, it's nothing to do with us. But I'm not happy with that answer, because if we are going to make a decision this afternoon that causes a particular problem for an innocent party, if I can put it that way, we can't just abdicate responsibility, because we know what we're doing. We know that if you go from a bungalow to a 4-bedroom house, etc., then we have this information about the joint sewage and rainwater facility. So could the officer just be a bit more specific on what our responsibilities are, rather than saying, oh, it's a matter for civil action? Because that really is completely unfair, in my opinion, and unreasonable. The other issue I've got, and it may be just because I can't glean it from the report, do I understand, it may be for Ms. Hanchett to respond to, that there is a lamppost there which has to be removed or relocated for access, because and it has to be done before the house is occupied. Is that the case, or have I misunderstood that?
Andrew, do you want to? Oh no, Karen, you're going to go first.
Go first, but I can't be helpful, and apologies, Councillor Amos. Where? Movement. Apologies, I don't know. First I've heard of it.
See if I can see it on the photos, Councillor.
Yes. I don't think any photos I've seen, I don't think any will show that frontage onto the road.
No, the lamppost does not seem to need to be moved. There is a lamppost there I can see on it on the application, but I don't think it needs to be moved. The access appears to already be in place on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side. Might be plans, but if they are, then obviously that would need to be carried out in conjunction with the Highway Authority and under Section 278.
Yeah, for this, as it's just a vehicle access, it would be done under Section 184, but it would still be done by our contractor Ringway, but they wouldn't need to enter into a full 278.
But for members of the public, all those numbers thrown around were policies that I have no idea what they are either, but they're obviously all highways activity.
They are sections of the highway.
Sections of the highway activity, thank you. Andrew, sewage.
Sewage, yeah, so under the principles of the, obviously there is an existing connection for the 2 bungalows. That is shared at this moment in time. Under the principles of the Water Industry Act, a lot of works are devolved to Severn Trent in this instance, to the Water Companies Act, and them to make a judgment as to what is prejudicial. And hear me say under Section 106, but not our Section 106 under the Planning Act, it's under Section 106 of the Industry Act. And if there is a problem that is prejudicial to the network, then it is Severn Trent's duty to resolve that matter with, again, the landowners. And that, in effect, therefore makes, so when you apply for a new house, although this is an existing house, then in effect the works fall to Severn Trent to establish the connections. That is, when you build a new house, apply to Severn Trent for connections. Saying if there are problems established under Severn Trent, say it's water industry. Anything on the land, so to speak, between the two properties, because it's private land, private sewage agreements, then in effect it is where we civil matter, whilst existing connections there, whilst there are extensions, and in case of any extensions to houses, those are civil matters. Council do not get involved by a third party.
I could try and make that a little bit more. Are you saying that that isn't a material consideration that this committee can consider? Thank you. I've got Owen.
Thanks, Chair. It might not be relevant now, but just listening to the conversation about this lamppost, I'm mindful that we've got two blokes that live on the road. So can we just ask them?
So I can,
that would make sense to me.
If you want, I can get the slide up that shows you the lamppost. If you
Just put the slide up.
So, sorry. So it's there on the left-hand side. Unfortunately, the pointer doesn't work, but on the left-hand side, you can see the pillars. I think that's to 175. So that, yeah, it might need to be moved. By the look of this area.
Well,
It might be.
so it's my understanding there are no alterations to the access, so there's no need to move the column.
yeah.
The access stays as. Yeah.
I think Councillor Amos has thrown us a red herring, but it's kept us on our toes, Councillor Amos, which we always appreciate.
Well, with your razor sharp intellect, Mr. Chairman, I knew you would pick that up, but I do object to the red. Why does it have to be red herring?
Yeah, blue herring, I apologise. More questions or points, then do we have a proposer for this application? I've got Councillor Agar Pat proposing, seconded by Owen. Those in favour of the recommendation presented before us, please raise your hand. Those against? Any abstentions? Carried. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for both applicant and objector for coming in and making some clarifications for us today. It's much appreciated. I now move on to agenda item 9, again, which we have speakers for, and this time Mr. John Stagg and Mr. Graham Coyle and Nick Carroll. And that is Lindisfarne House on Full Barton Terrace. Paul. Dr. Paul, I apologise.
Which one do I press? That? Oh, I'm talking. Oh, right, okay, I'm on. This is application for Lindisfarne House, Full Barton Terrace, demolition of a side extension, which also forms the subject of the following application. Listed building consent, erection of 2 semi-detached dwellings together with parking and landscaping. Oh, no, I've got it. There we are. Did you do that, Margaret? You did that, okay. That's the location plan. The site is ringed in red, and the side extension, which will be made clearer later on, is the piece along the bottom that sticks out into the open ground. So that's the site. Next one, please, Margaret. Oh, it's working. This shows the listed buildings in the vicinity of Barbourne Terrace. Barbourne Terrace is running along the bottom. Lindisfarne House is listed, numbers 1 to 3 to the right are listed, numbers 5, 5A, 6 and 6A are listed. Then there's a gap for 7 and 8, and then the numbers carry on. It's consecutively numbered in the road. The building below is Francis House, which was an art school, and it's locally listed. So, and it's also within the St George's Square conservation area. So it's a heavily protected area. That's a photograph from the early years of the 1900s, about 1904 to about 1908. It shows Barbourne House on the left. Before the extension was added to it in the 60s, you can see the terracing along the front, a fountain in there, and then a much lower Italianate garden with some glass houses in the rear. Part of the portion of the rear of the site was sold off in the 60s, about the same time as the side extension was built. And so the site is diminished from what you see there. There shows a contemporary view, perhaps slightly earlier, late 19th century view. You can see the house and the fountain that I pointed out, and the terracing. And the glass house is at the top, hatched. The upper third of that has gone to housing at the back. That's the house as it looks more or less today. It was the regional offices of the National Farmers Union from the mid-50s onwards. They built a side extension on as a meeting room and as a function suite. It was added about 1964. This is the proposed replacement pair of dwellings. So the image to the left, the block to the left, is Lindisfarne House minus the side extension. That's the rear view, and Lindisfarne House is now the block on the right. You can see the building is higher at the back, simply because the ground falls away by approximately a metre. This is the front elevation. Lindisfarne House is on the left, and number 3, Barbourne Terrace, is on the right, and you can see the separation that there is between the houses. And when you look at the broader street view, the separation when the proposed block is built is pretty similar to the gaps that already exist between the houses, Barbourne Terrace. Those are the side views of the 2 blocks from the east and west views. Basically, it's a stairwell light, and that's all. They're not from habitable rooms. It does make the point also about how the eaves height of the proposed dwellings actually lines up with the eaves height of the existing buildings. That's the detail of the rear view with an indication of the landscaping that's proposed for it. You've again got Lindisfarne House on the right in this view, and number 3, Barbourne Terrace on the left. Again, it makes the point about the separation between the two. It's worth pointing out that number 3, the flank wall on the side of it is blind. It has no windows, so there's no danger of overlooking from number 3. So there are a number of floors. There's a lower ground floor. You can see there the arrangement there. They are an entire mirror image of each other, the proposals. Ground floor access level, second floor level, bedrooms, then the 3rd floor with some additional rooms as well. So it's quite a simple design with good room standards to it. It's taken a long time to get, as Councillor Lou mentioned earlier on. Negotiations with highways taken quite a long time to come to fruition. And this is the agreed parking plan, which allows, I think it's 13, isn't it, Karen? 13 parking spaces for the remainder of Lindisfarne House, assuming it has an office use. Then adequate level of parking for the 2 new dwellings, which is on the right. Just some street views, just to indicate a few points about it. I mentioned already the separation distance between the proposed new dwelling and the dwellings to either side. That emphasises that. That's the view from the street as it is at the moment. You can see just on the left is Lindisfarne House with the extension. You can see that those houses are a considerable distance back from the road. I think from the street to the front of the existing properties, which will be the same building line for the proposed dwelling, is 26 metres. And then a couple more just to illustrate the point, a view from Google Earth with Lindisfarne House in ears over the trees, makes it clearer, the separation. Also reinforces the building line that all the houses. Right, that's all I've got to say. I will just say at this point that Mr. Stagg is about to speak, has submitted some illustrations, and I will be taking the committee through them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. Mr. Stagg, if you'd like to take a seat at the table. Again, Mr. Stagg, I'm sure you heard first time around, but just I'll reiterate myself. You get 5 minutes to speak. At 4.5 minutes, George on my right will wave a hand, gives you 30 seconds to wrap up. If you press the button on the right-hand side of the intercom in front of you, that will enable a red light will come on, and we'll all be able to hear you. And at the end of your opportunity to speak, members of the committee can ask you questions. Are you happy? The floor is yours, sir. Just like at football, don't worry, we've pressed the pause. You've not eaten into your time.
They both come on now, is that okay? Excuse me. My objection is to the principle of developing two houses in the garden of Lindisfarne, a listed building in St George's Square Conservation Area. Designed by local architect Henry Day for Thomas Chalk, a flamboyant Worcester Herald proprietor, it departed from earlier terraced house designs by its unique, detached, Italianate villa character, emulating the grand country estate style. Considered Day's finest work and finest Worcester house of the mid-19th century, it epitomised an affluent style of suburban living. The gardens were a locally significant example of ornamental, formal, early Victorian gardens with fountains and balustrade stone steps leading down to a sunken private garden and an exuberant orangery and glazed pavilion at the northern end. Prior to its listing and conservation area designation, most of its estate was disposed of for housing 33 units, 2 of which were in the rear garden of Lindisfarne. Removing the orangery, pavilion and boundary wall, the stable, coach house and outbuildings to the rear were later disposed of for a separate office conversion. Luckily, an integral part of the garden abutting the house survived, protecting its detached villa setting. Evidence of garden ornamentation exists, and there is likely to be more under the surface. The garden should have been surveyed in detail, as remains would be protected by the listed status of the house. No further capacity exists to accommodate more housing without depriving Lindisfarne of its garden, causing significant detriment to its special interest. Next, relationship of the garden to the house is paramount. The east side of the house is a principal elevation facing directly into the garden, giving it the same status as front gardens of all listed dwellings within St George's Square Conservation Area. Its building line is not just along the front elevation, but turns at 90 degrees to run alongside the east-facing elevation. Building 2 houses in front of this principal elevation equates to building in the front garden of a listed terraced Georgian house, something the council has never condoned. Next, removal of the side extension is in principle welcomed, with reservations on lack of details. The reinstated east window views will face directly onto the blank side elevation of the new dwelling in separate ownership, negating any listed building benefits, making the house unviable for a future residential use. Appropriate development should be subservient to the listed building, away from principal elevations and ancillary to the historic building. It should be designed to complement the style of the historic building rather than importing a generic design from another site. There are cases when infilling an historically important site is appropriate. Lindisfarne is definitely not one, as open space at the side was an integral part of its historic domestic curtilage and character. No development is required to fund essential repair costs, as the application confirms the building is in good condition. All the front garden is a car park. This was identified as having a negative impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area in Worcester Council's 203 conservation area appraisal. Next, please. Such parking does not exist anywhere else in Barbourne Terrace or St George's Square. This scheme intensifies the parking harm. Highways require off-street B1 office and residential parking, totaling 19 spaces, 13 for office use and 6 for new houses, with associated access widening and demolition of the part of the listed wall. A recent survey I carried out revealed between 25 and 31 cars parked at Lindisfarne on different occasions. Actual parking provision will there be wholly inefficient. Additional to the detrimental impact on Lindisfarne, the acute on-street residence parking problems in the area will be exacerbated by pushing about 17 cars into the streets already full to capacity. Current use is unclear. Only office use has planning permission, yet the site is a church. Contradictory application information states it's B1 office or F1 church use. This should have been clarified through the planning process. Confusion also exists about how Lindisfarne is to be used. clarification is fundamental to considering the appropriate future use of this site.
Councillor Mr. Stein.
It is widely accepted best use for an historic building is the use for which it was originally designed, which is a dwelling. This should have been the starting point when considering the application. Demand exists for detached houses in this conservation area, which are currently being marketed up to £1 million plus. Lindisfarne would make a fine family house as long as a garden was kept. It is the only listed building not to have been reinstated to a dwelling in Barbourne Terrace or St George's Square. Loss of natural light and sunlight on the dwellings and the former garden is a material consideration which should have been considered by expert opinion as part of the application. In conclusion, this proposal, coupled with the unknown future of the historic house, would have significant harm.
Mr. Stagg, you're going to have to come to an end. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
your 5 minutes is up.
Just got one more sentence. Would harm the special architect and historic interest of the listed building, neither securing its preservation or enhancement. The council is urged to refuse this planning application. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stagg. Appreciate it. Are there any questions from members of the committee? I've got Councillor Amos, then I've got Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stagg, I've listened with interest to your presentation. You make a number of, I think, powerful points. Do you think there is scope for some other form of development or building residential properties on this side, or are you saying there should be none at all because of the nature and the historical value of the property?
You can never say there should be no development. I think the crucial thing and the crucial starting point was saying how is the listed building going to be used? And the crucial thing, and the thing that this council has actively promoted over the many years, is to try and encourage the building to go back to its existing use, which is a house. And there are many examples. 33 Britannia Square is an absolute brilliant example, and Warndon Farm is another one. Regarding the question, what sort of development could you accept? I think there is a case that you might have accepted an ancillary use. I mean, the preference would be to have the building go back to the house, and what the application should have said was you employ a estate agent to market the house for a reasonable time, for a reasonable sum, and see if there's any interest. And that forms part of the application. That's been done, that's accepted practice by planning inspectors and accepted practice in the conservation arena. I think in respect of a building, then I think you could conceive of a single-storey building right at the back of the site, which could be a contemporary version of the Orangery, and it could be one unit. And there are some very good examples of that. Lower Board Heath, Lower Brockhampton, the National Trust building has got one in a walled garden there. Very good example. Possibly then you might have taken the view that you could then have 2 dwellings on the site. Be much better than office, church, what is it? Or office and church, or both, or whatever is it? I don't know. The application doesn't say. So it's totally confusing. And you know, yes, you might have got a single well-designed building, but it would have to be right at the back of the site. As soon as you put something in front of that principal elevation, you negate the possibility of ever using Lindisfarne, ever getting Lindisfarne back as a single house, and it would be very popular. Houses are going, detached houses in Barbourne, in the Barbourne Terrace, are going very quickly. There's one on the market for 1.3, which is not even a listed building in Barbourne Crescent.
Thank you. I've got Marjorie now.
Thank you, Chair. I too listened with great interest to say I was concerned about the garden. And I do where you're coming from. But at the moment, the existing church, are you aware that they have any intention of giving?
No intention. There's nothing. In actual fact, there's contradictory evidence. One saying it's B1 office use, and the other one saying it's church use. And the county surveyor, after taking a year of deliberations, has only applied an office use standard, and that's why there was only 13 spaces. The fact it's used as a church is confirmed by the fact there were 31 cars there the other weekend. So, you know, and then if you're going to have another 6 for the house, that is intensifying a use, which, I mean, if you look at the conservation area appraisal, if I could have that up, Paul, possibly. done in 2003 by the City Council. Okay. Have you got, well, okay, that's okay. That's the close-up one, I think. Yeah, I'll just comment on that. Okay, right. If you see that, all the red properties are listed buildings. All the green areas are areas that contribute to the character of the conservation area, and the one frontage that doesn't is in Lindisfarne. And if you go back and you get a close-up view of that, and that area that currently takes those cars is going to be intensified, so it's going to have even more harm. And the whole principle that council has tried to do in the past is to encourage gardens to go back. And in fact, there's some very good examples of houses being restored in Barbourne Terrace where that's happened. The next door property, 5 and 5A, which was Radio Wyvern and office uses, has gone back to residential. And there's clearly a demand to do that. And it would have been very useful if the owners of that site could have confirmed exactly what they're doing. It is definitely not clear. And really, the only reason that building is the actual carbuncle ground floor extension is coming down is to facilitate the building of the two houses.
I'm going to have to interrupt. So I need to remind members of the committee. So everything that Mr. Stagg is informing us of is very, very interesting and obviously correct. However, the application we are looking at is not the listed building, Lindisfarne House. It is the two buildings to the left. Now, of course, there is a consequence of one to the other, but the fact that you could turn Lindisfarne back to a house is not relevant to what we are considering today. But Mr. Stagg, we do take your appreciation. I just want to bring everyone back onto the planning application as we're looking at. But are there any more questions for Mr. Stagg? Mr. Stagg, thank you very much. I now call Mr. Coyle and Mr. Carroll, and again, you will get 5.5 minutes, the same as Mr. Stagg got, in order to be fair. And that's between the two of you, not each. That wouldn't be fair. George again will wave her hand at 5 minutes. And if you press the red button on the right, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Graham Coyle. I'm one of the leaders of City Church Worcester. We own the site. Our reason for the application is very straightforward. Since the mid-90s, we've used the site and sought to bring benefit to the local community as well as our own church community, and we simply have outgrown it. It's too small for us. We always have to hire larger buildings to meet in, and as a charity, we have a responsibility to maximise the assets of the trust, hence the application for the buildings.
Thanks to John Stagg for bringing that information. It's not totally correct. I appreciate he was the ex-conservation officer. We have a current one who has analysed this scheme in Paul Collins, and I urge you to trust the evaluation that has gone on over a long period of time here. The existing building was a church. It was almost sui generis. It's going to be turned into an office. Very clear. The two buildings the two houses that are designed, yes, we have form in Worcester Road in Malvern, and the design of that has gone down very well. We don't advocate a pastiche copy of Georgian. We take it into a modern tilt using the same proportions of window, the golden rectangle shape of the glazing. No, you won't see through those particularly, and no, there's not an extent of glazing that is going to contravene building regulations. So there's lots of things here. That old garden, beautiful, it's gone. There is a massive tarmac at the front. It'll be tidier when the new design has been done. There is a slope of the garden at the back. That is all that's left. And there is nothing of that heritage that can be restored. The side is not a principal elevation. The front is where the front door is. The side will be restored back to its original fenestration and not smack bang against a wall. You can see the large separating distances, arguably from where I'm sitting to that wall over there. There is plenty of scope for this development. Yes, the old house was designed by a flamboyant local architect. A flamboyant local architect now designs for the new era. I'll take any questions.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Are there any questions from for Mr. Coyle or Carroll? I've got Councillor Amos.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just indulge me for half a second. I'm just looking through a particular description of what it is, because I was going to ask Dr. Collins, but I'll ask the gentleman before us, because I think Dr. Collins, oh, so here we are, yes. Obviously, Lindisfarne is a beautiful house. I mean, I just personally like Georgian things and traditional things.
Because it reminds you of your childhood.
I don't actually, unlike you, Mr. Chair, I don't actually remember Queen Victoria, but I'll take you over it. Yes, I mean, it's an interesting development, this, isn't it? It's a modern expression of Georgian architecture. Now, I'm a little bit, I mean, with tongue in cheek, I'm not quite sure what that means is, because it's not actually Georgian, is it? So a modern expression of Georgian. In that case, why not just have Georgian and be done with it? But can I just ask the gentleman what they actually mean, because I'm not sure, by reinforcing the proportions of the golden rectangle on the front and back? Because I'm not quite sure what golden rectangle I'm looking at that's being reinforced. And I say, I'm just a bit concerned about the new architectural style that has developed, a modern expression of Georgian. So presumably we have a modern expression of Tudor and all the rest of it. I'm sure Dr. Collins will give me a lecture afterwards about that.
Gentlemen, if you'd like to elaborate on the question regarding the golden triangle, that would be helpful.
And from the small panes of a Georgian pane of a window to the larger window itself, there is a general proportion of 1 metre by 1.61 metres that gives a nice vertical emphasis to the glazing. And in the Georgian days, everything was picked off a shelf, and it was all coded. You didn't necessarily draw it. It was all out of a code book. The modern expression is, let's take what's the essential character of Georgian architecture, the materials, the form, the proportions, but we can express that in a modern way.
Thank you. Councillor Amos, does that
Well,
answer
no,
your
it's
question?
just, I suppose, it's a comment or an observation. Can't you express it as Georgian, as in Georgian used to be?
Existing Georgian architecture, because you're copying it. If I liked your hairstyle and I came in with the same hairstyle, you'd say, hey, this is my style. Now, in the building environment, we don't try and copy, because we're not there. We're not the Georgians. We are the modern day area, but we respect and regard their characteristics, and we want to assimilate somehow with what that is. If everything was horizontal and flat, you'd think that jars. But you can't copy. Pastiche is a cheapening effect onto the existing character of the conservation and other listed.
At the risk of getting into a very philosophical discussion, I think that's a super. Many people like Shakespeare. Many people don't like Shakespeare as it's rewritten in a modern twist. So, but I understand your description. Thank you. It's a matter of taste, I think, Councillor Amos, as opposed to
I think,
material.
Mr. Chairman, philosophy is not your strongest point.
No,
so,
engineering is my strongest point.
So I will simply say you're very welcome to my hairstyle.
Yeah, exactly. Can I have some as well? Any more questions? I've got Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. The only issue I have is the side of the building of Lindisfarne looking out onto the new build. And there aren't any windows on the new build on that side, are there? So there won't be any overlooking. Is that?
Is front and back. Anything at the side just allows a bit of light to penetrate some of the other areas.
And as I understand it, the idea at the moment is for it to, Lindisfarne to be offices. Of course, at some point in the future, it could become a home again. And I understand there's some fabulous glass and so forth within that building, which would make it, well, a palace rather than a home. Have you built that thought into your process or not?
Whether it should stay church offices, housing, flats, single house. And you know what? That option remains. Who decides that? The market. So on the side, let's establish a market use as is required. But the existing house, some buyer might come in and say, look, I'll have the lot and I'll make that a house and 2 houses to the side. Nothing is set in stone until it's built, but we have to come up with what's left of the building when the church organisation moves on elsewhere. And there will be less parking. Streets. Offices requires a lot.
Thank you very much. We've got Owen.
Thanks, Chair. It's regarding point 2.5 from the agenda item, and it says that the vicinity is known to be inhabited by badgers and bats. Now, with respect, I'm not interested in badgers, but regarding the bats, I've got a question for officers. Has a bat survey been conducted? And a second one to developers, knowing the layout of these 2 buildings on the side, is there the opportunity to encourage you to put in bat blocks or bat bricks in order to replace something that may have been damaged in the build?
I'll let Mr. Collins ask the question reference to survey, and then obviously Carol, you can answer the question reference bat bricks.
Endangered species and habitat survey was required as part of the application. They only have a certain life expectancy, as it were, a certain currency. They have to be refreshed. So it would depend upon the timescale over which the building was sold, whether the permission was still extant, but it would need to be done again before work commenced. But it has been taken into account.
Such that before the start of works, that further surveys will be carried out. Yet we're great advocates of putting bat bricks in, not just on the building. You can make all sorts of habitats in the building, but also in the grounds as well. The trees, you know, it's there. It supports the existing habitat.
Thank you. It's not really a question. I suppose it's a series of comments, if that's all right, Chair.
Of course it is.
I note that we have a tree protection order on, which is very gratifying, because I seem to remember seeing on the on the slides that there was, in fact, it looked like a cedar near the front of the area, and there's some.
And so there's a massive cedar tree, but it is so far forward of where the development is happening.
Lovely. Well, hopefully that, you know, we'll be able to keep the character that exists as much as possible. I appreciate the designers, the developers' attention to detail and the attempt not to have a Georgian pastiche, but to sort of obey this rule of design, which goes back much further than the Georgians, but it's a sort of tribute to the classicism of the era, which the Renaissance also did. You know, you find Renaissance paintings with that kind of proportion. Well, you do. So that's much appreciated, that there was that attention to detail. And I would note also that the Conservation Areas Advisory Panel are quite pleased with this. So that weighs with me quite a lot. And the fact, I think, is that this house has a large curtilage which has already been encroached upon, certainly at the rear is my understanding. So in fact, it's not really going to be possible to restore an Italianate garden. I think actually that this is not a bad use of the space as a result. So I would be in favour of that and propose it.
I don't think we're at that point yet, but unless there are any further questions, gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time to come and brief the committee today. It is always appreciated. Take your seats to the back. We'll now go into committee debate on the full item. I will say that a number of the questions that were asked are covered in the conditions, i.e. back boxes, etc. So that there are quite lengthy conditions on this application. So if members just remind themselves of that. My first speaker, I've got Mel Alcott.
Thank you. Yeah, I know this area very well, and I know towards the beginning, Mr. Collins spoke about Francis House. It is actually Francis Court because I did go to high school there for 3 years, so I do know the area very well. And I think at the time with Francis Court, they went to an awful lot of trouble to maintain the building as it was, and it's in keeping the area. And knowing Barban as I do in the area, it is a beautiful, it's a unique area, and I have no objection to some of the. But to my mind, when you take the context of the whole Barban, it looks very out of keeping. The other list, I think there could be a far better.
Thank you, Mel. I've got Alan Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question and a comment. The question is to Ms. Hanship about the parking. Inevitably, can she confirm that it is in accordance with the design guide?
Thank you, Councillor Amos. The information we've been provided with and what we've based our parking requirements on is that the building is a B1 office. So they are providing full standard car parking based on the gross floor area of that for the office, and then of course the two properties are providing full standard car parking for the 2 4-bedroom dwellings. So it is all it all complies. I mean, I do note the comment from the objector about 31 vehicles, I think, being parked on site. That does differ to the information that we have been provided with by the applicant, in that sort of only with very special events would there be a maximum of 20 cars at the moment. But as I said, we've based the standard on an office.
Right, so it is in accordance with policy then. The other point, Mr. Chair, if I may, just really a comment. I think I reluctantly have to accept that this site has gone, in my view, for having something nice on it. And I think it's a great shame. Personally, I find whatever it's called, the new expression of Georgian or whatever, I personally think it's ugly, and I think we could have done a lot better. I really do. But again, I accept the principle of development on it because, as Councillor Agar said, that tarmac's over it, we can't do anything about it. But I think it's a lesson to us as a committee and to the council generally. We need to look after our historical assets much better. I mean, how is it that you've got a beautiful building like Lindisfarne, and there's tarmac and goodness knows what around it? So that area has now gone, such that development like this becomes possible. I really think we need to learn the lesson, Mr. Chairman. I think it's tragic. I'm not sure I want to support this application because I think the buildings are ugly, but I accept that there will be development on it because we haven't looked after or taken care of the generality of Lindisfarne, the location where it is. And I think that's a shame, and we need to take account of that.
Thank you, Councillor Amos. Unfortunately, sometimes we're left with the decisions that were made 30, 40 years ago, and we look upon these things now in a slightly different light, maybe, with more consideration. But we are where we are. I've got Jill, and then I've got Marjorie, and then I've got Andy.
Is there any process by which we will know for sure that the church won't stay after this? Because I think the church being there result from it remaining.
I think we can only go with the information we've provided by one of the trustees of the church today, who's told us that it's going to be an office. I'm looking to Duncan to see. Yeah, that's where we're at.
So the answer is no then, there's no, not wrapped up in any way, but the change of use is wrapped up. There is no change of use. Okay. Currently a church. So that could stay exactly.
I'm told that it's not going to.
I understand.
Okay, thank you. I've now got Marjorie.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with much of what Councillor Amos has just recently said. I do think the design could be better. I don't really see anything wrong with building something more in keeping with the existing buildings. But at the same time, I note that there haven't been any comments from other residents of Barbourne Terrace. And Barbourne Terrace is absolutely beautiful. The houses are gorgeous, and you would imagine that the people who live there would, having chosen to live there, would have an interest in what the entire street looks like, but they haven't commented. Although it's possible that the long delays on this particular application have made them think that it's gone away. I don't know. And I also know that the Conservation Panel are happy with it. So balance is a difficult one, but yes. Thank you.
Just to say, Chairman, that the neighbours were consulted in the usual way. The immediate ones by letter and public notices were served, and we had exactly as Councillor Bishop said, we had no comments from the immediate. One comment from a gentleman living at the back on what had been part of the site, and no comments from Francis Court either. So, and in addition to that, because of the nature of the building, we also we exercised discretion and referred it to Historic England, who also.
Dr. Paul, I've now got Andy.
Right, sorry, it turned itself off for some reason. I thought Mr. Stagg's comments were very interesting. It's rather sad, no fault of his, of course, that he made those comments probably decades too late. But they still had weight. But then as far as the proposal's concerned, I don't agree with some of my colleagues about the buildings being ugly. Far from it. And I do see that they're not a pastiche of the Georgian period, but they do give a little bit of a tilt towards that. And so they're simpatico with the area in which they sit. So I think they look rather grand with their reference to the Golden Triangle, which I think was Babylonian, by the way, rather than you know. But I am also influenced, as just been suggested, by the Conservatory Advisory Panel. Now that panel meets on a regular basis, and in my mind does a really good job, and it slightly concerns me that at this committee their minutes come up and we say accepted, and I don't know that they're read particularly. But on this occasion, they've not hung back. They've been very positive, and say that it's in their view, it actually adds to the conservation area. That's not to be taken lightly. That has a great deal of weight. So although I listen to Mr. Stagg's views and I am sympathetic to them, I quite strongly support this application.
Thank you, Andy. I've got Owen.
Yeah, I'm second a lot of what Andy said. Personally, I prefer to look at the Georgian building, but I don't think this is ugly in the way that some people have said. It may not look as nice, Georgian building, but I don't think it's ugly. I'm prepared to support this, but I'd like an undertaking from the applicants regarding these back bricks. If they're happy to do that, and then I'm more than happy to support this application.
I think it's at paragraph 8. It might be further. It's a condition on the application, Owen. Yeah, condition 8 and condition 9 that the back bricks are essential. I've got Jenny.
Thank you. Now that the issue about privacy between the two buildings has been clarified, I think that these two new buildings reference the ratios of architecture of the rest of the row. So I think they fit in quite well. If we were building fake Georgian buildings now. With the squeaky floorboards and the leaky windows and everything else that comes with old houses. I only live in a Victorian house, and there are enough little eccentricities in those that every now and again I yearn for something a bit more modern. So I think actually this is a good solution for the site. Clearly not overdevelopment, because it's got decent sized gardens as well. I think it will fit in very nicely. I hope that Lindisfarne becomes more than just offices, because it deserves to be, but that's for the future.
Thank you. I've got Jill, sorry.
Yes, I'd just like to say I think it's important that that you would not get if you had it.
I've got Mel. We will have to get to a vote in a minute, Mel. You've spoken once.
Yeah, Chair, it was just a quick question for Karen. So the answer will be, but obviously I'm also a county officer in the traffic regulation department, drawing up refresh. Which that would happen. I understand that won't have any.
Okay, thank you. So in which case, I think everyone's had an opportunity to speak at least once. Do I have a proposer for the recommendation? I've got Councillor Agar proposing, and I've got a seconder in Councillor Ditter. To which case, those in favour of the recommendation to approve this application, please raise your hands. Those against? Any abstentions? In which case, the application at Lindisfarne House is passed. We now move on to agenda item 11, which is, I apologise, agenda item 10, which is the heritage element of Lindisfarne House.
It is. Right, there we are. Thank you, Chairman. So this is the complementary application to the first one, which we're considering now because the previous one has been approved. It's for listed building consent for the demolition of a side extension to Lindisfarne House. Familiar with the site? That's the one we looked at before. That photograph's turned up. It's from the late 50s, and it actually, just between the tree and the car parked on the right, you can see there's no side extension. That's the side extension as built, as I say, built when it was in the ownership of the National Farmers Union as a meeting room and a function suite. So that's the road frontage view. I am of the opinion that those, at least two of those windows are the ones that came out the side of that. There is a condition. Go back in, because you won't get anything that marries up better than the original. That's the side of the building, which is not attractive. And that's the back of it. You will notice, because of the terracing that's been talked about, how much brickwork there is beneath the windows to accommodate the changing. The planning history is very interesting. There's a whole load of things. I can't quite read it. Councillor Agar, could I ask you to move slightly across? So, to summarise all of that at the bottom, the complete demolition of the house has been proposed twice and refused twice. Proposals to extend it to the rear have been withdrawn twice. Now, this is the key one to what we're looking at this afternoon, Chairman. Consent to remove the existing single-storey side extension, storing the host property, has actually been granted by this local planning authority on 2 separate occasions. So there's a precedent there. It shouldn't necessarily guide us, but it has actually been done before. And the principle of adding a dwelling to the side was established, albeit ago. So there's quite a complicated planning history. Another point that Mr. Stagg didn't mention was the fact that the property was only listed in 1971, and a lot of the things that are being reversed were actually built when it wasn't a listed. Probably how they got there.
Paul, thank you very much. At the risk of preventing people speaking, and I'm not, we've just spent a long time discussing the previous application, which we've approved. We have a precedent on this. Do people want to speak on it, or Not, or are we happy to go straight to vote? I've got Jenny wants to speak.
Thank you, Chair. On the original building, there were balconies to the side wall that will be reinstated. Are you intending those balconies will be reinstated as well as the windows?
Any other questions? We have a proposer? I've got a proposer in Owen, seconder in, Pat, seconder in Ditter, sorry, he had his hand up. He's quick on seconding today. Those in favour of the application? Those against?
Again?
Abstentions? In which case that agenda item 10 is passed. We now move on to agenda item 11, which is 55 Martley Road.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the change of use from a 5-bed existing HMO, which was granted planning permission in 2019, to a 6-bed HMO, which incorporates a ground floor side extension, bedroom and an extra bathroom with associated off-road car parking. The application site is shown on the slide, outlined in red, and it lies to the southeast of the junction of the Martley Road with Fern Road. The outline of the extension is shown in black. It lies to the west elevation, but still set back from the highway of Fern Road. The plan on the left shows, again, the extension on the western elevation with 2 parking spaces to the south. That slide's upside down, unfortunately, and this parking space in front of the property. It also shows, annotated with the letter A, which runs from the gate to the front garden round to the first car parking space, that the existing fencing would be removed and replaced with a dwarf wall with iron railings on top. So the slide on the right-hand side shows an amended bin and cycle storage scheme. So the cycle storage is in the rear garden, secure behind a gate, and the bin stores immediately next to the gable end of the proposed extension. The purpose of this plan is to demonstrate that the additional off-road parking space required for the additional room for the HMO would be accessed more than 20 metres from the junction of Fern Road with the Martley Road. Again, it shows the dwarf wall and iron railings around the boundary of the front garden. Plans here are of the existing front elevation and the rear elevation, and again show the side extension, which is a 4.5 metre projection from the existing side wall. The extension incorporates a hip roof, the same as the host dwelling, and is considered to be subservient in terms of its proportions and appropriate in terms of its design. Again, we've got the existing side gable end at the top of the slide and the proposed extension on the rear. The front elevation of the extension is set back from the principal elevation, which accords with the supplementary planning document. Here are the ground floor plan, first floor plan as existing and proposed. So the bottom slide shows you that the extension would be accessed internally. It doesn't have any external access, and it would provide an additional bedroom and also an additional bathroom for the occupiers of the HMO. This drawing shows the outdoor amenity area that would serve the extended HMO. It proposes an area of combined front and rear of 285 square metres, which is in excess of that required in the HMO SPD. Turning to the photographs now, there's the property as existing. As you can see, some work has already taken place in terms of landscaping the front garden area. And this photograph shows you the existing concrete plinth and posts. Previously, there were fencing panels within those. They've already been removed. And under this proposal, they would be removed in their entirety and replaced with a dwarf wall and railings. This is just a little further back on Fern Road. So there's off-road parking. The garage that you can see next to the electricity substation is to be demolished. And you would have parking spaces the right-hand side of that gravelled area, then the extension alongside the existing gable and an additional parking space, the left-hand side of the proposed extension. Then this is a view from within the front garden showing the existing fencing which is to be removed, which would open up views out onto Fern Road. And a landscaping condition is recommended alongside the implementation of the dwarf wall and the railings to add further filtering of views within, out of and into. I'd just like to draw members' attention to the late paper, which recommends an amendment to condition 4. That's just to make sure that the dwarf wall and railings are implemented and then retained. And in addition to that, officers have noted that condition 2 and condition 6 also need to be updated to reference the amended cycle and bin store drawing, which were omitted in the recommended condition report.
Charlotte, thank you very much. Before I open it, I am a local councillor in this, and I'd love to find loads of reasons to object to an HMO. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, in this instance, if anyone remembers what that property looked like 3 or 4 years ago before it was developed, it was in an awful condition. And there were some objections then from residents, but they seem to have been minimised now down to the issues around parking and the closeness to the edge of the road, which in the paper it answers that they are 20 metres away. I'd love 6 parking spaces, Councillor Amos, but the former Highways Cabinet member who drafted up the paper said there only need to be 3. So it meets those requirements, and the removal of those fences is a significant betterment, and I think a highway safety issue, and we had spoken to Highways previously about it. So as the local resident, councillor, I can't find any reasons why I can object to this. And if anything, I'm saying it's probably an improvement, even though there's an extra person. That said, I do take the comments of number 40, Fern Road, who has concerns over noise. The amenity, I'd like to say there isn't any, but it doesn't say in our standards that amenity has to be the rear of a property. It can be to the front, and you can see where they've already started to put some grass down and some decking. Yes, so I'm sorry, I've abused my powers as chair to have my rant first, but what's the point of having power if you can't abuse it occasionally? I open to people's comments. Yeah, open people's comments. I've got Councillor Jenny Barnes and then Alan Amos. Councillor.
Could you clarify the internal dimensions of the new little bedroom on the ground floor, please?
In terms of the footprint of the extension, that's 23.85, but I don't have a calculation for the bedroom. We can go back to the drawing, it might be on there.
That's for this bedroom, because effectively half of it is the bathroom. 11 metres square seems very tiny. Okay, in that case, that's one of my concerns out of the way. The other one is the barrenness of the front garden, and I'd like to see a lot more planting to soften it up and give a bit of humanity back. It does look, with the grey building and the grey gravel, and just, I don't know if it's even grass or is it fake grass, it just looks a bit soul destroying. I wonder whether we can soften it up with more planting.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Barnes. And just coming back to you on the size of the bedroom, it's my understanding that in an HMO, a typical single bedroom is 6.5 square metres, so at 11 it does exceed that. I also share your concerns about the landscaping, and the drawing that's been submitted shows very sparse amount of additional planting. However, condition 6 requires them to submit a landscaping scheme. I think we can make a note on file that we would expect a lot more than they've shown on the indicative proposed site plan. If the wall is a dwarf wall with railings, benefit of the occupants as well as for the amenity of the area, I think we would expect some fairly decent tree planting to soften views in and out of the site and increase biodiversity on the site as well. So condition 6 controls that, and when the application to discharge that condition is submitted to officers, we will look at that very carefully.
Unpleasant. And we need to be considering things like that nowadays.
Unfortunately, I don't think we can dictate to people, other than if it fails to meet our biodiversity standards, what you lay in your garden. Because a lot of people might say, actually, if an HMO owner might say, well, I can't get the students to tidy the garden because I can't direct that on them. They may not allow me to come in to mow the lawn because students can prevent you coming in, and therefore the garden, I've got other residents who've got gardens who are in a really poor state of repair because they can't get in and sort them out. So I take your point. I think we're between a rock and a hard place sometimes. Oh, Duncan.
Thank you. Through you, I think there is a balance to be struck between recognising addresses, but equally through the planning process, as long as we are always trying reasonable in a planning sense, try and secure some just.
Thank you, Duncan. I've got Alan, then I've got Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could Ms. Hansett just clarify that the parking that is being provided is consistent with the design guide? And the second question, Mr. Chairman, I note, despite your optimism, false optimism, I suspect, this seems to be planning by attrition. Originally, it was from 4 to 5. Then it was from 5 to 7, which they probably thought they couldn't get, so they've gone from 5 to 6. I wonder how long it will be before the application is down from 6 to 7. But I'm merely musing on that possibility. So I'm sure Karen Hanchett can confirm that it's in accordance with the design guide.
Thank you, Councillor Amos. Yes, I can confirm the minimum standard 3 spaces. It has 3 spaces. Of course, in this instance, they are just going, they've already got permission for the 5-bed HMO. They're just 1 additional bedroom, and they'll space.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, I think Councillor Mitchell's problem. There aren't many reasons on this occasion to be too difficult about it. But is that on-site or off-site, that parking space?
It's all on-site and off carriageway.
Oh. I've got Owen. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to go on record. I think this is absolutely monstrous, hideous, but I'm not sure we can actually refuse it, to be honest. if there's going to be planting to improve biodiversity, that'll make the garden look at least partly habitable. But I'm happy to go on record, so everyone can hear me. This is monstrous. Very much.
Thank you, Aaron. I've got Pat.
Thank you. I'm with you on,
Yeah.
on that, Owen. I think a lot of us think it looks pretty ugly. But Charlotte gives us some consolation there, and I'm relying on her to try and mitigate what she can, because I don't think we can really refuse it because we don't like it and it is ugly, and it's certainly ugly. I'm very pleased to see the condition about the drop curb because they're bumping up and down the curb lately. So hopefully, you know, a little enforcement around that might be helpful. Otherwise, I think we're going to have to approve this one.
I'm going to ask if there's someone who's willing to propose this application. I've got Councillor Ditter proposing the recommendation to approve. A seconder? Pat?
Bite the bullet.
Yeah, I've been asked by our legal advisor, by ask I mean she's kicked me twice, to bring to your attention the late paper, just to make sure everyone's aware of the late paper. Thank you. And the amendments to the conditions. Sorry, I apologise. We've had a proposer and a recommender, a proposer and a seconder. Those in favour of the application to approve? Unanimous. Oh, 10. Those against? Those abstentions? Thank you. I thought we had at one point a unanimous approval for an HMO. That would have been a break. Can I just say, Charlotte, thank you very much. The pictures that you put up were really, really helpful because it helps bring that to light. Because not all of us know each other's wards. I mean, I don't know every area around, and that was really useful. Sometimes getting pictures at standoff as opposed to the actual detail, I found that really helpful. So thank you very much. Councillor Amos. Yeah, I know. On record. We now move on to agenda item 12, which is the application at 17 New Street. Councillor, I've just been asked to remind you, but you all had an email. Councillor Denham wanted to speak today. She was unable to attend. She has sent what she wanted to say forward. That's all been passed to people. So just a comment. So people should be aware of that. Andrew's after you again.
Back to me. Thank you, Chair. One last time, but right. So this is an application for the change of use from a hot food takeaway and a 3-bedroom flat to a laundrette and 3 residential units for short-term holiday lets. Demolition of existing 2-storey return, erection of a new single-storey and 2-storey extension to the rear, and all associated works and extensions and alterations accordingly. So the application site is outlined in red right in the middle of the site. It is surrounded obviously with it by other developments. That's a bit closer so you can see where the red line is. So this is the front of the property as existing on the left-hand side, and on the back as proposed. You can see the existing extension on the right-hand side as you come out of the proposal. So the existing building has an existing cellar, has an existing takeaway with its own service counter, and then the bedroom is over the flat or apartment is over 2 floors on the first and second floor. So as I say, the proposal will change the ground floor and the basement for the purposes of the laundrette. The extensions to the rear, so there will be a ground floor extension which will be one of the short-term holiday lets properties, and that is, put it down somewhere, apologies, 37 square metres, which is in accordance with the national space standards, even though we don't apply them because we haven't adopted it into policy. Bedroom 2 or apartment 2, the first floor, would be 35 square metres, and that is just below national space standards. And then apartment 3, which on the second floor is again 37 square metres, which again would comply with national space standards. Now, the other aspect to consider is obviously the top floor, and here you get the proposed extensions, again existing rear side extensions, proposed side, see the extensions. Apologies, I thought there are some photos within the application report. Just trying to find my application report. So in effect, yes, so you can see the figure 4, but also if you're looking at internally, councillors, there are some issues. Certainly the top floor would have issues with tall people, shall we say, in terms of the eaves height. Whilst the space standard does meet the national space standards, as I say, it is in some ways compromised by the eaves in themselves. Now we have, obviously, one of the questions will be, and ultimately what happens if somebody wants to stay longer or it doesn't become short-term holiday. Obviously that is a change of use, and so it was required planning permission in its own right. So we have conditioned and restricted the use of these 2 short-term holiday lets, and those would be in terms of the space set out, we consider to be acceptable. As I say, they're only just below the national space standards in terms of apartment 2, and as I say, that is a matter conditioned. And in terms of the late paper, but I'll come to that in a minute because that's the listed building. There will obviously be internal works and vents that will need to be carried out, but again, those works would be conditioned accordingly. But the recommendation for this application is as set out in the report, which is to recommend approval. Councillor.
Andrew, thank you. Just point of clarification, so we're all aware. If this was an apartment to be permanently resided in, the space conditions would not meet our standards, but because it's a temporary let, that's the reason why we have accepted it. I just want to be absolutely clear.
So we haven't adopted the space standards, and that's why we say we judge it on the layouts. There's obviously exceptions to that, and that one of those exceptions, ironically, is listed buildings, which this is. So we would have to consider bringing the listed building back into use. So, but yeah, it would be apartment 2 that is troubling, and apartment 3 that are tight, shall we say.
And the same on parking. It falls outside of the parking requirement because it's a holiday let, and anyone who was coming, much as you've booked a hotel book a hotel room and it hasn't got parking, you know that, and you make a choice of to go there because you know you're going to have to find somewhere to park your car. I just bring that to point because they're all questions that I asked, and I was like, oh, how does that work? But I just thought I'd make that clear to everyone. I open the floor to debate.
It's just a question about the Conservation Advisory Panel comment that they say they're citing overdevelopment for the site with the objection to the infill for the rear courtyard. And I recognise that it says no amenity space needed for the occupants if it's not residential, but is there a wider concern that as its status in the conservation, that overdevelopment and the impact on the building itself?
Yes, we have considered that, Councillor, and again, that is part of the reason. Obviously, when it's in a city centre location, you don't expect the same level of amenity as you would do in perhaps suburban locations, but there is a small, I'd say, courtyard proposed, and in addition to that, if we can go back to the slides, Margaret, sorry. Probably highlighted this more closely. So you can see there are a number of extensions and alterations around next door, and so the level of coverage per se wouldn't be a reason for objection. In our view, we do obviously take very seriously the comments of the Conservation Advisory Panel, but obviously one of the things we do is obviously take into account other material circumstances. So it's, as I say, that is the reason why we haven't said that. And as I say, if I can just very quickly, you can see on the right hand, on the ground floor, proposed ground floor plan, you can see apartment 1 has some double doors that open up on the right at the top, and there is a small area of amenity space being proposed. But again, that would be perhaps an issue if there were permanent residential apartments, and again, that would be something we would have to discuss if they were.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It brings in, I said to Mr. Thompson at the beginning of the meeting, I complimented him because he thought I was born yesterday, because I questioned whether, or how certain it was that these were actually going to be used as short-term holiday lets. Because by the definition, and of course you don't need amenity, you don't need parking, you can build as small as you want, because they're holiday lets. So let me ask Mr. Thompson, through you, Mr. Chairman, of course, how do we know they're being used as short-term holiday lets? What is the definition of short-term, and who's going to monitor? So how do we know that they're short-term holiday lets and not substandard accommodation? Because I think Mr. Thompson, I have to be fair to him, be fair, has exceeded himself this time, because these rabbit hutches are smaller than the ones we've done before. We're now down to 35 square metres, and he admits they're below the national standards, whether we accept them or not. They're still below some national standards. At a time when people are getting bigger and fatter, it amazes me that we're allowing accommodation that gets smaller and smaller. But obviously they're for holiday lets, so it doesn't matter. So can I just know what the definition is of holiday lets? Sorry, of short term. How are we going to know? And if we do find out, what are we going to do about it?
In terms of that, whether or not, how do we know? Well, obviously, it's whether or not they pay council tax onto the property. We will be obviously able to monitor those kind of properties. I'm sure you're aware, for example, of Pitmaston House. We're aware of it's on Airbnb and websites accordingly. So we are able to find these kind of types of accommodation. Again, we would liaise with council tax and business rates and just make sure that they are continuing to do that. So the definition of short-term holiday lets, there is no specific definition as far as I'm aware, certainly not in case law, and I've been involved in a couple elsewhere, but it would be in effect, it wouldn't be somebody's permanent residence, i.e. their primary residence. They would have to be live somewhere else as their permanent residence.
I think Duncan wants to
Yeah,
add
I think
something to that.
exactly. Yeah.
Andy, please, you're just going to.
Right. Can I refer you to paragraph 8.3, which is brilliantly written, and I'm sure it covers everything. And it's, to me, it's just totally unintelligible. It talks first off about limited harm. So we accepting that the development would harm the ambience or whatever of the local area. The local area, I would say, which is, I mean, I suppose you'd say the cathedral's the jewel in the crown, but this area is next to it when people visit Worcester. And this is the bit they remember. So there we are. It's limited harm, but harm indeed. And then it goes on to talk about whether its benefits are outweighed. And it goes on to the SWDP, and it talks about a five-year housing land supply for residential properties. Now, two questions come from this. is the one that I keep talking about, I'm afraid, and I believe that Worcester has got a 5-year a supply for housing. But what is annoyingly referred to as wider Worcester, which takes in Cowley and north of Malvern Hills, has not. So we're dragged into this on this basis. But in any case, as Councillor Amos says, as their holiday lets, they're not residential. So how can that possibly be relevant?
Duncan, you were going to pick this one up. Doesn't really matter who answers it. Just answer.
Because the application is for short-term holiday let accommodation as opposed to permanent residential accommodation, somebody's sole place of residence, whether we have a 5-year housing land supply or not is not directly relevant or material to the conclusion that we've reached as officers. So on that point, I think we're in agreement with you. I think it's not helpful for us to get into a debate this afternoon over whether we have a housing land supply collectively or individually, but that is something that we will be bringing to you in a separate report shortly. Be briefing you before then, not just members of planning committee, but all members, updating you on some which are being concluded at the moment. I think that's all I can really say in the meeting today, but the point being that this application is for short-term holiday accommodation. And if I can take the opportunity to answer Councillor Roberts and Councillor Amos's concern or question in one go, can I take members to page 82 in the agenda and condition 3? Having come from a rural authority with lots of applications for holiday let accommodation, there has for many years been a debate as to how long is short-term let, how long can somebody stay. If they stay at the beginning of, say, August, and then they go back home, how long is it before they can come back again? If they went home for a day and then came back, is that a gap or not? The point I'm trying to illustrate is that from an enforceability point of view, it's better that we don't try and overcomplicate the condition. Temptation to do that. I've seen appeals against conditions allowed, and inspectors have preferred a simpler approach. If you look at the last part of the condition, that's actually the most important, starting with the word shall, or the words shall not be occupied as a person or person's sole or main place of residence. If evidence came to light that suggested that that condition was being breached, we could serve what's called a planning contravention notice, which is a notice which seeks information from the building owner for exactly what is happening. And it's an offence to answer that notice untruthfully. If we've considered that on the balance of the evidence that there is a breach, then we could serve an enforcement notice. And as you will all be aware, the recipient's response to an enforcement notice against it, and then that would be tested again. So it is always a case of it's a matter of fact and degree as to whether there is a breach, whether there is evidence to suggest that there is a breach at all. We would have to investigate that sort of thing like we would in any other case.
Thank you, Andrew. So I've got Jill, and I've got you, Jenny, later.
I've got a question about the laundrette. Very particular conditions.
Yeah, we do have some conditions on the listed building application relating to the proposed vents and the potential water supply and all those kind of things. Obviously, what I would say is it's also a hot food takeaway, which has its own noise disturbance and odours coming from there. So we obviously have to balance what is currently approved against what is proposed, and whether or not there is a fundamental difference between the two.
Thank you, Andrew. I've then got Owen. I've got you, Mel. Owen.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a comment, really. I'm right in thinking that we've not adopted these national space requirements.
They're national, so therefore we have to adopt them.
Right. I find it a bit odd that we talk about them every planning meeting, and there's been examples of where something's, I don't know, 6.6 meters squared, smidging over these requirements, and that's fine. And this is under, but that's still fine. I don't understand. These are minimum space requirements.
Like anything, we have to look at the balance, and whether on the balance of the information we have, we would be willing to accept a slightly smaller space because of the other benefits. And that's your decision that you as a member have to make. I think I know where you are on that decision, but it is a balance. Most applications don't meet every requirement of the National Planning Policy Framework, but where you believe as a member that on balance it's not satisfactory, then you have the right to vote against, and you have your reason for that. So thanks, Alan. I've got Andy Roberts. Andy, have you got another question, or is that it? Thank you. I've then got Mel Alcott, Jenny Barnes, and then Pat Agar.
Yeah, thank you. Just really briefly, I just welcome the fact that we have a change of use from a hot food takeaway. I feel as though Worcester's rather saturated with that. So just a quick positive comment.
Thank you, Mel. I've now got Jenny and then Pat.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, this started off as an application for residential. I attend the Conservation Advisory Panel, and particularly for flat 1, where there was only a ceiling light to provide light for the building, and the lack of amenity, it was considered actually that this was not appropriate housing for people. So it's interesting that it's now being turned into holiday lets, where there's a more relaxed attitude. But there's still no amenity space for flats 2 and 3. And the amenity space for 1, I'm not quite sure how that works. It's tucked behind another building. The whole of the original footprint of that building would go under building to flat 1. So that, I think, is overdevelopment of space. So from that point of view alone, I think that it's undesirable. I also worry about large machines that whir and clank, and how that's going to affect the fabric of a very old building. You know, my tumble dryer and washing machine bounce around a bit, and I don't think that that is necessarily prudent use of that building at the moment. So again, I've got concerns about that. So I'm very concerned that this is being sold to us as one thing, and it may well end up as something.
Thank you, Jenny. I've got Pat.
Thank you, Chair. I think I concur with a number of the issues that Jenny's expressed and others. I'm concerned that a laundrette will require a lot more holes punched in walls and floors in order to get enough machines in there. And this is a listed building, so there will be quite a bit of damage to the fabric. I also would be concerned about the rear flat. I mean, you'd have to be a troglodyte, really, a cave dweller to really want to live in that one, because it's only got skylights, it hasn't got windows. So quite apart from the space concerns, I think it sort of adds up to me to not being entirely what we would want to see. And of course, if it were to be approved, I would certainly want to see our enforcement officers taking a close look at it from time to time to ensure that conditions were complied with regard to tenancies, lets, and so forth.
Thank you, Pat. I've got Karen.
Chair. I actually went to have a look at the site this morning. You know, I can see it. There is actually a laundrette sign already up on the building, but next door they are short-term lets, and I looked at their website. It's a company that's running them. Inside, they actually look really the ones next door, and I looked to see whether I could book one this weekend, and unfortunately there's no room at the inn. So it wouldn't surprise me if these are going to be short-term lets, because the location is so attractive for people who want to come and stay. I am worried about the size of them, particularly the wind. I don't know why, if you're coming on holiday here and you want somewhere to stay for the weekend, you don't want a window to look at. It's a bit, it doesn't stack up. So it does seem a little bit like it's overdevelopment, because why would you choose a room that doesn't have a window if you could choose one that did? So I just thought I'd give you that insight.
Thank you, Karen. I think everyone's had a chance to speak, and I think that it's quite clear that the committee I'll come to you, Ditta, give me 2 seconds. It is the question of looking at this application through the eyes of a short-term let, noting the need to enforce it's a short-term let, and people staying there maybe 1 or 2 nights, as opposed to a permanent residence. And I know I wouldn't want to stay in a room without a window. I might have when I was 20, I don't know. But this is the beauty of planning committee, I think, is that officers have done a report and made a balanced decision. And that's why we get an opportunity ourselves now to look at it and say, well, we might come down with the view that on the balance of our view, that it's not suitable. I don't know, and I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, because I think the location of this unit is ideal for tourists to come and stay 1 or 2 nights. It's right in the city centre, and it will probably be competitively priced, I would have thought, because it isn't as good as staying in the Premier Inn or somewhere like that. If there are other hotels available, obviously, in case someone's listening. But yeah, it's a tough one, and I think we're going to have a very close vote. I've got Ditta, and then I've got Pat again. I know.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Chair. I think you've said most of the things that I wanted to say anyway. I think you covered it. I think I understand the predicament that people need windows to look out, but they're not there, I assume, to look out. They got other times to look out. They're there to sleep in the evening, maybe 1 or 2 nights. And here we are. We're trying to encourage shops to develop and rebuild. We're encouraging and then enhance because the size doesn't fit. The building is what it is. You just can't. If we alter the whole structure of it, it wouldn't be listed. So there's a remit that they can do, and I think we should be welcoming that any tourist or input within that city, even if it's 1 night a week or 2 or 3 or whatever. So I'm very supportive of this. If you want to propose it, I'll be more than happy to propose.
Thank you, Ditta, and I've got to propose it. Thank you. I've now got Pat, and then I've got Owen.
Sorry, Chair, something I did want to say and forgot was that I don't think I'd want to stay in that back room because of, you know, you've got, no, it's about fire precautions. I have the same kind of nerves about that being enclosed without enough exits as you would have in a cellar room, for example. I would want, you know, I don't think it's safe.
Fire regulations are a different question, I'm assuming, but Pat, you make a good point, and I guess because it's a short-term let, it becomes a person's choice of whether they want to stay there or not. But of course, there is a fire regulation point that we'll have to go. And actually, we have the former deputy chief of the fire service here, who probably can speak a little bit more eloquently on that than I can.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why this keeps turning off, but it does. No, I'm just to follow through Pat's comments. I don't know whether he's tackling this from the right way, really. Councillor Ditta quite rightly says that we need accommodation for visitors. We want to encourage visitors and agree with them entirely. And then I take Pat's view. So when you said about it's choice, it isn't choice. You go online, because that's what we do these days. You go online and you find yourself, oh, I can stay I can stay in Worcester on this base, and you turn up and you found you've booked accommodation in a shoebox, and that's your impression of Worcester.
Yeah.
And so is that good for the city or bad? I reckon on balance it's bad. If it were that the accommodation were in the ancient Tudor part of the building, and then I would say, well, okay, you've booked a Tudor room, you're not going to have a modern standard. But if you're going to build something bespoke for the purpose, why would you build it when it doesn't come up to the standard it should come up to? I also take notice yet again of the Conservation Advisory Committee. They think it's overdeveloped and have similar concerns about the constraints. So I know there's been a proposal to support this. I won't be supporting that proposal.
Thank you, Andy, and I think Duncan wanted to add something. I'm going to come to you, Owen, don't worry.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, I don't know this, but I strongly suspect that the double doors outside the amenity area, clearly that would improve the amenity quality to a degree. I think when it comes to you voting on this application, either that it is overdevelopment, doesn't present short periods of time, or you come to the view that on balance it is acceptable that those coming on holiday for particular or for break or whatever the purpose of their visit, they've read the particulars. Typically these days tells you, and then you make a judgment. We also look at the previously. That kind of if the level of natural light particular could delegate approval to we might be reassured by that. I'm not seeking to steer you either way. If it was an approval, but you had underlying concerns about that, procedurally that might be a way forward.
And I'm going to go to the vote.
I'll be quick. It's just a comment, really. I just find this definition of a short-term holiday let very, very woolly. I've been in holiday lets, go for a week. The idea that somebody's going to come and stay for a day or a night, that sounds like a B&B, minus second B being breakfast. I don't believe these are going to be holiday lets. Very reluctant to support this.
I will say though that if we approve the application today, we are approving for a holiday let. So if they are used outwith of that remit, then there would enforcement action be taken, which we've had explained. But no, I take your comment, Owen. I've got Councillor Amos, who I'm sure is going to be equally supportive.
You're wrong again, Mr. Chairman. Well, I mean, I'd like to formally move that we refuse it on grounds of overdevelopment. But there's an argument that bothers me, Mr. Chairman. That's why I really want to raise it. We're saying, well, people go on the internet and you know, if they want it, they'll book it. If they don't want it, they don't book it. Are we saying that if somebody is prepared to literally book something which is perhaps, say, 9 square meters or something, we're happy to build that so that somebody can then let it? Surely we as a council must have minimum standards in allowing things to be built that we don't want to be built. You know, because I accept there may be somebody who's got a very tight budget, it is a shoebox, and they say, oh, well, that's all I can afford, I'll go there. But we have allowed that to be built. I don't want us to be building the slums of the future, because this is what these are. Remember, as we talked about earlier with design, people's expectations and requirements change over time, and they are simply going to change in an upward direction. Space is going to be at a premium. So to build things that are already below minimum standards, the government has set this as minimum standards, and we are knowingly doing that. It is simply wrong, and we should not be doing it, Mr. Chairman, because it raises the question, and I have raised before, and perhaps not this second, I know you've got to go afterwards, but I think we've got to deal with this question. I said that we should have a debate and we should take measures to ensure that we do operate according to minimum standards. Because I can't justify, as a member of the planning committee, approving things which we know are below minimum national standards. We wouldn't do it with health and safety or anything else. So why are we doing it with space? We've got to grasp that, Mr. Chairman. It's no good saying, as a colleague said earlier, you know, well, it's a little bit above, so that's okay, but if it's a little bit below, that's still okay. We've got to have minimum standards. That this is our city, and we want to be proud of it, not just doing the cheapest thing we think we can get away with because some developer wants to make a quick buck. So that's why I move that we refuse it on the grounds of overdevelopment.
Thank you, Alan. Mr. Radford, Duncan wanted to come back and say something, but
Thank you, Chair. It was very quickly to say that Councillor Amos is absolutely right. It is within your sphere judgment whether we have standards or not. And clearly, the development plan doesn't anticipate every type of application in front of you. Whether you as a planning committee or us as officers making decisions under delegated power. It is absolutely right that you look at an application and its merit, decide, just like an inspector might, in what is acceptable. Planning sense, use that. As long as you do it reasonably, then those decisions ought to start. Clearly, you're familiar with the way that no guarantee. Really right.
thank you, Alan. I'm just going to say, so Alan, you proposed a refusal. We already have a proposal on the floor from Councillor Ditter for approval. So we either need to get a seconder for approval as the process, or Councillor Ditter withdraws his. So is there a seconder for the approval? In which case we don't have a seconder for you, I'm afraid, Ditter. So we would now then go to your recommendation for refusal. I've got Pat who wants to speak as well. Are you supporting? So we've got a seconder in, Councillor Agar. So, yeah, I'm coming. I've been at home getting interrupted. No, I'm joking. If I heard correctly, the grounds for refusal are overdevelopment and lack of amenity. Yeah. And sorry, Karen, have you got another reason as well?
Sorry, Chair. It's the fact that this is a grade 2 listed building, so the overdevelopment is even more.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
linked to
It's
the fact that it's a
context of
grade 2 listed building.
The conservation area.
Yeah, I will. I've got you. So what we're going to do is we have a recommendation to refuse, which has been seconded, and I'm going to say that that is referred, if it is passed, we refer to the chair and vice chair to confirm the reasons for refusal, if people are happy with that, which is the way the new process works. So based on the fact that it's grade 2 listed building, overdevelopment and lack of amenity, we now go to the vote. Those in favour of refusing this application? Those against? And those abstentions? Okay, so in which case this application is refused. Yeah, please do. Yeah, but it's the listed building one next, isn't it? But I think this could go on, Pat. Go and have a cup of break. Please make it quick because I've got to get to Watford. Could I ask everyone, Councillor Amos, can you make your way back in, please? We're doing listed building first. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. Of course, you're out for this one. Councillor Amos, put the biscuits down. Thanks very much. I hope everyone's managed to grab a coffee and do what they needed to do. So we now move on to agenda item. No, we're going to do something first, aren't we, Pat? No, we're going to go on to. Sorry, I apologise. We're going to go on to the agenda item 12. 13. Apologies, we moved on. Agenda item 13. 17 New Street, the conservation piece.
This is the associated listed building consent for the demolition of the two-storey return, the erection of the listed building aspects of the erection of the new single-storey and two-storey extension, and the internal and external alterations. You should note on the late paper there is a proposed amended condition relating to the proposed installation of machines and vents into the shop front. So very quickly, you've seen these before. So let's go back up. You can see the red lines there, which indicate the demolition of the old building, and what I'll say that is principally the building on the right-hand side, the proposal, which obviously is an extension itself. So it would involve some alterations internally. As I said, the laundrette would be on the ground and basement level, and the alterations to the first floor to create the accommodation for apartment 2 or short term 2. As I say, those are the extensions. The recommendation is for approval, but obviously I'm mindful, obviously, of what you just said. So, in terms of the planning application, so if you were follow the planning refusal, the harm would be the listed building consent preempting here, I know, but it would be on the basis of the harm to the historic asset that you would need to, as a result of the proposed extensions that you would focus on, rather than the proposed accommodation, which is obviously dealt with through the new planning application.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm grateful. We've been given a good steer. We could sit and talk technical for 20 minutes, or we could just take that recommendation and go with it based on the previous decision we have just made. Got proposer there, and I'll second. Those in favour? Oh, I'm rejecting it. Yes.
Is it on the
No, on the grounds of the harm to the listed aspects of the building. There we are. Approved. Unanimous.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, Councillor District, you've been awkward. No, okay.
It wasn't.
He's abstained. Okay, you can, but it's called awkwardness in where I come from. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 14, which is 20 Staplow Road. Oh, sorry, Charlotte, all yours. I'm not used to people being polite to me in this room, so thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a two-storey side and single-storey front and rear extensions to 20 Staplow Road, which which is a two-storey semi-detached property that lies to the southeast of Staplow Road, which itself lies to the southeast of the Spetchley Road. The application site there is outlined in red. As you can see, it's a semi-detached property with a detached single garage to the rear. This is the proposed site plan. Not very clearly, unfortunately. It does show the black outline of the extensions, which are to the front of the property are single storey. To the side, they're two-storey, abutting the boundary with number 18, and then wrapping around the rear of the property as a single-storey element. The site plan also shows 3 proposed off-road parking spaces, which do accord with the streetscape guidance. At the top of your slide, you have the existing principal elevation, the two-storey semi-detached property with the single garage. That's set back. Obviously, that's not quite so clear on that back as you saw on the site plan. And then to the bottom of that slide, you've got the two-storey side extension with the single-storey wrapping around extension to the front of the property. The ground floor would be built to the common boundary with number 18, but at first floor, to comply with the SPD design guide, it would be set back by 1.1 metres. Again, as members can see on that proposed elevational drawing, the ridge height of the extension is set down modestly from the original, and the front elevation of the two-storey element is also set back. This is the rear elevation. So again, at the top, you've got your existing drawing, and at the bottom of the slide, you have the proposed. Again, it shows the first floor extension set 1.1 metres from the common boundary, but the ground floor abutting the common boundary, and with a single-storey element wrapping around the rear of the property. This is the side view to number 18. So again, at the top, you have your existing with the gable facing number 18's gable, and with the detached single garage set in the rear garden. Post extension, you can see the single-storey element with the monopitch roof, and then again at first floor, the 2-story extension, and that shows the setback front elevation and set down ridge. And it also demonstrates that these single-story extensions at the rear would link to the existing garage, which itself would be converted to provide an additional bedroom. These are the floor plans. So at the top, you've got your existing ground floor plan, which shows a semi-detached property comprising of an open plan lounge dining room, separate kitchen, and the detached garage in the rear. And the proposal effectively links that accommodation with ground floor additions, front, side, and rear, and as I said earlier, linked to the existing garage, which would be converted. It's annotated as bedroom 5, but when I go on to the next slide, you'll see there's a misnumbering. It results in 4 bedrooms. So these are the first floor plans. On the left-hand side, the existing 3-bed property, and the proposal on the right-hand side, which shows you it still would have 3 bedrooms at first floor. The proposed first floor extension would increase bedroom 3 and provide an ensuite shower facility and an additional cupboard area to the rear. This is Google Street View from April 2021. Apologies, it wasn't the case officers haven't managed to get to site, but I thought this view would be helpful for members to see where the property sits in the street scene. So we have detached properties, and we also have 2 pairs of semi-detached. The red arrow indicates the siting of the proposed extension. It also shows the property to the right, number 18, and to the left, 22, both have off-street parking that is provided over the entire front garden area. So this is the host building on the right-hand side. So again, at the moment, they do have off-street parking, but as part of the proposal, the wall to the front alongside the pavement would have to be removed, the curb dropped and extended to provide the 3 off-road parking spaces, similarly to the adjoining neighbours' provision. This is looking towards number 18. So as I said earlier, the proposed ground floor extension would abut the common boundary, which is quite clearly demarked there by the edge of the tarmac, but the first floor would be set back by 1.1 metres in accordance with the supplementary planning document in terms of design guide, so that you would minimise the potential for that terracing effect between those 2 detached properties. This is a shot between number 20 and 18, again showing the garage is set back in their rear gardens, and it also demonstrates how the boundary and the distance between the gable end of the host building and that boundary tapers to the rear of the site, hence the narrowing of the extension on the plan. And this is a view across the front elevation, showing where the wraparound extension would provide a new enlarged lounge and hallway. In terms of policy compliance, your officers consider that the scheme does accord with the SWDP and the design guide. It has incorporated design elements to minimise the potential for a terracing effect, and it's recommended that permission is granted accordingly.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. I'm going to go straight to Councillor Agrose, the ward councillor for this ward. I know she wants to speak on this, and then we'll go on.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. McKenna, who lives next door, isn't here to speak for himself today. He's on holiday. So I thought that perhaps the least I could do for him was to say what it was, or some of the main concerns that he had. He feels that this is overdevelopment and that this will then be a very large building and out of keeping with the rest of the street. He was also concerned about the distance from his own driveway. I mean, I think it's policy compliant, but to him, he felt that he might actually have a problem with his driveway. So those were his 2 major concerns.
Thank you. Right, I've got Owen.
Just 2 quick questions. Check I've got this right. So there's going to be an extension to the back, the side, and the front. That's correct.
Yep.
And the second one is regarding where it goes in terms of the boundary. Is it going right to the boundary, or is it set back
my understanding is correct, the ground floor goes exactly to the boundary, and then the upper floor cuts back 1.1 metres to put it compliant with our SWDP, am I correct? So where you saw the brick road on one side and the paved, it will go up to that brick road.
The reason I asked was because I wasn't sure you were allowed to do that, but obviously you are. So.
So I know this area well because I live in that road just a little bit further down, and I drove past it the other day. And when I drove down that road, there are a number of ground floor extensions which go to the boundary, and most of them, there's two that are actually linked, so basically they touch together. There is only one second floor extension along that road, and it is on a much larger plot of land, house on the corner. For me, when I looked at it and then visualised this development, it just looked too big for me. Personally, I'm looking at it and I'm saying that's overmassing. Considering they are all relatively 1960s, I guess, 2-3 bedroom houses, you're now putting a large 4-bedroom house, and it just strikes me as completely out of kilter with that limited short. And there are only about 15 houses in that street, Staplow Road, and so I personally will make myself known now that I can't approve this application because I just think it's overdevelopment. And if that carried on all the way down, we'd set the precedent. You would end up with a large brick wall along Staplow Road. So that even though you might have a metre gap at the top. Sorry, I've voiced my concern. Ready, I've got Alan and then I've got Andy, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's good news that you agree with me. I must admit, 5-bedroom dwelling there. Can we just have one of the pictures back?
It's a 4-bedroom. We were told it's 4.
Oh, well, it says in the report it's 5. Under 6.1 Worcestershire County Highways, the proposed development will result in a 5-number bedroom dwelling.
Through you, Chairman, just to clarify, there's a drafting error on the submitted drawings which incorrectly numbers the bedrooms, but we can go back to the slide if that's helpful, so you can count the bedrooms.
Well, no, if it's 4, Mr. Chairman, that's fine. But it was just, I just wanted to see because Councillor Cleary raised this question. They're building up to the boundary. It was between the shop between the two houses. That one. That was the one. Yeah, sorry, that's the one. Now you've got the 2 windows there and 2 doors, obviously with glass in. You see, there's a gap between them. You can't really overlook. I wouldn't have thought there. If it's built right up to the boundary, I mean, gosh, you're actually almost, if you leant out the windows, you could shake hands. It is very, very close. So do I assume correctly, Mr. Chairman, that the left-hand side, in effect, is being brought out to the boundary, because there's a door and a window there which is glazed of the existing property.
I'm sure Charlotte will confirm, but that's
It's
exactly
helpful
right.
if I bring the drawings to demonstrate that. So members can see that's the first floor extension, which is set back 1.1 metres. Wouldn't be up to that boundary, and it shows a bathroom window, and I think that's another toilet window. So those would be obscurely glazed, and there's a condition amended to cover that matter. At ground floor, yes, it would be up to the boundary, but there aren't any for ground floor windows. So going back to that photograph, you would have a solid, you would have the view at the bottom there as the neighbour approaching their door on the side of their property. They would be presented with a solid brick elevation.
And another, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I just confirm the officer also said earlier that one of the bedrooms was going to be en suite? Was it number 3 bedrooms going to be?
My memory is correct. It's the bedroom on furthest away from this.
Yeah, but either way, a bedroom is going to be en suite. Right. Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, that all I would want to say on this is I agree with you. It's totally out of keeping. But I think, me being the old cynic or young cynic, is that what we're building here is a future HMO. That's what we're building here. And I never mind that for one, because I can't prove it except a passage of time. But it's clearly overdevelopment. I mean, you can't possibly. I mean, and the whole question of these wraparound developments. We've had it before, Mr. Chairman. You will recall. I know each on its merit, etc. But if you're going to extend something to the side and the front and the rear, My advice would be, for goodness sake, just go and buy a house somewhere else, because clearly this is not appropriate. You can't just plonk this kind of property right next to somebody else. It's not on, Mr. Chairman. We've got to draw the line somewhere. So I would agree with you and move refusal for reasons you've said.
I've got Councillor Andy Roberts, I've got Jenny, and I've got Jill.
Thank you.
Karen.
Can I have a clarification first of where all the objectors are? Or where all the objectors are? I mean, I assume if this terrible thing was that awful, and a list of objectors, have I missed them?
No, you're right. I think the only objection is from the gentleman who lives, as Councillor Agar has said, who's going to be living next door to this.
Oh, right, there we are, there we are. Thanks very much, that's clarified it. Can I look at the photograph of the street scene, please? There's another one that's a bit closer up, isn't it? There we are. Thanks very much. So now can I drop back to the wider street scene? And we're saying in our suggestion to refuse that extending to that line will completely destroy the ambience and character of that road to a point that we should refuse permission. Well,
That's what I'm suggesting.
I can't see that from where I'm sitting. I can't see that. And the business about whether you can build up to a boundary, if that's a material planning condition, then it's a new one on me. And the business about whether this is a precedent for others to do the same, that's a new one on me too, because normally we deal with each application on its merits. So I would suggest that all the grounds for refusal at the moment are whimsical. And on that basis, if there's no sound reasons for objection, I would have to support it. Always saying that the first step is it conforms to the necessities called by the development plan, which is a first hurdle. So so there we are. I think we're going slightly awry.
Duncan, you wanted to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, some of the recommendations that we bring to you will be finely balanced. I think this is an example where one is trying to extend their existing test that planning terms by see what decision we reach, probably before they have to consider moving to a larger property. And from time to time, we'll see exactly this. On balance, we felt that form of extension, Charlotte explained a moment ago, the fact that the first existing house, that two-storey element is in from that boundary. This is where planning judgment comes in again. You might weigh up all those same considerations but arrive at a different. If you carry out that exercise in your minds and you are leaning towards, then I think what I've heard already this afternoon, that you've probably got concerns of it appearing perhaps the element of overdevelopment, your concerns of the street scene, because although some efforts have been made not to close that back completely, clearly there would be some closing. You might feel more strongly. If you're concerned the impact on the neighbour, although that's being a sitting out, you might, as well as the other point, be concerned the overbearing. Your officers came to a balanced recommendation. Approval. You might weigh up those same issues quite reasonably different.
No, thank you, Duncan. It saved me having to come back. I've got Jenny, I've got Jill, I've got Karen, and then I've got Owen.
First of all, a question about the garage area, which will become bedroom 4. Is it the same footprint, or is the footprint extended in that area?
Proposal links to the garage but reuses it on its.
So it's not going to be rebuilt?
The drawings.
So moving from there then, we've got this wraparound, which is 1 and 2 stories, plus tacking on the garage at the back to make another bedroom without actually rebuilding it. Seems a bit odd. Not quite a shantytown arrangement, but quite, I don't understand. We're being told it's one wraparound, but actually with the extra garage as well, it's an enormous area going under a different type of occupation. For that reason, I believe, and of course there'll be no access to the back garden around the side either. I believe that it's going to be overdevelopment of the site. So I would not be happy to approve this.
Thank you, Jenny. I've now got Jill.
I've got a question about the access to the garage. Is it possible for this to be able to get to his garage built? Just a question. I don't know what the answer.
I don't know the answer to that either, and I'm assuming Charlotte will be able to tell us. You want to put the one where you've got the 2 parts up?
Sorry. Through you, Chair, just to clarify on the query, was the query that once if permission is granted and the extension is built up to the edge of the tarmac, that the neighbour who has objected wouldn't be able to get to their own garage? The brown door garage. That's the question. Thank you. I think that the position is what's occurring at the moment. So obviously, as a landowner, they would only have right to drive over their own driveway as existing, and that will be dependent upon the width of their car, whether they can do that currently or not.
But they're not, in theory, they're not allowed to. Yeah, I know what you mean,
Yeah.
but I know what you mean.
In theory, they could if they had that agreement, but in legal terms, they wouldn't legally be able to drive over. And under permitted development rights, either of those neighbours could put a 2-metre high fence along that boundary and separate that driveway. So
I
it would
understand that. I
depend.
was really asking. Different requirement for them was different today.
I think where we're trying to get to, Jill, is that even if this was refused and they put a 2-metre fence up there, which they're entitled to do without planning permission, and it meant he couldn't get his car up there because he's got a Humvee, then unfortunately that's just the way it falls. Which may sound crazy, but I see what you mean. I've got Karen and then I've got Owen.
Thank you, Chair. My first one is, based on a lot of the questions from other councillors, I really think that what is missing in this application is a site plan that shows the context of the application. The drawings are not helpful. The distance between this and the impact it has on it. Tell that from, actually, there's another objector about the rear of the extension. Talked about rear, and we haven't seen how it relates. So I think it's a shame that we don't have a plan that Secondly, if you look at the ground floor plan, I don't know. Thank you. At the front of the hall, we've got a bathroom, then we've got a kitchen that runs along the whole length of the house, takes across a central area, goes across to a dining room, with the bedroom tacked on at the very end. Not a very efficient use of space. Seems to be one of the biggest kitchens I've ever. And again, it's the fact that drawing again doesn't really help me because I can't really see the logic. Yes.
You have a third point, Karen?
I have. Oh, well, that was actually that we had a second objection.
Okay, thank you very much. I now go to Owen.
The point I was going to make has been covered, but I'm happy to second Councillor Amos's.
Okay. I'm wondering, do we have anyone else wishing to speak? So we do have a proposer and a seconder to refuse this application based on overdevelopment, out of keeping with the local area, and overbearing impact on its neighbour. Have I missed anything out from anybody? No. Oh, yeah, and again, it will be delegated to the chair and the vice chair for final agreement of the wording. And the corporate director. Okay. They don't really get a say, it's only us members. In which case we go to that vote for those wishing to refuse the application as presented against the conditions raised. Those in favour of refusal. Those against refusal? Those abstentions? Thank you. So in which case that item is refused for the reasons we have identified, and I'll leave officers to go and come up with some proper wordy stuff around that. Thank you very much. Can we call Pat back in, please? Because we do only then have any other business, but we do have a little bit of any other business today, which is Andrew is going to give us a brief, and by I say brief, I mean a short resume on the recent inspector's decision to overturn our refusal of the Rose Villa application. But before we get to that, Pat is just going to say a few words to Andrew.
Thank you, yes. We've very much appreciated all the hard work you've done, Andrew, and it's been heroic, basically, you and the team. And we know that, you know, you've got this backlog down well below 100, and we were really quite worried about that. So thank you for all that you've done, and really bon voyage. Hope you do well.
Yeah. So, and I'll endorse what Pat said. But Pat was the one who thought about saying it, so I wasn't going to steal her thunder. So no, I completely endorse it. We've seen some really great strides in planning, so thank you very much. And I think key is that your willingness to engage with both residents and members on topics. So that has been much appreciated, Andrew. Wish you best wherever you're going. Somewhere else. Where are you going?
Yeah, I'm off to Cherwell, as I say. My replacement starts on the 5th of September, and I hope you give him an equally warm welcome. I'm sure he will hit the ground running and help you going forward. But yes, obviously it's been an interesting 10 months. But obviously, as the job title says, I am an interim. But I'd be nothing without the team around me. And as I say, the team have risen to the challenges we've set them. And whilst I do work hard, obviously, or try to work hard, as I say, they too have worked immensely hard. And the transformation in the team as well should be do come into the MAG and sit and meet the team. You will see hopefully a transformed and improved environment from when I arrived 10 months ago. As I say, thank you for the kind words. It will be interesting to see new challenges will arise in the future. We'll get a haircut before my My time starts.
So now to the brief, Andrew.
Now on to the brief, shall we say. I was also just going to highlight Pitmaston House, but I've also sent an email to all members on that matter. But if I'm very clear, I think Rosevilla is one of those things that was predated me. It's been going on a long time. And I think a lot of members of the council, of you guys, have seen a lot of those changes and applications, and I think as well a number of officers have dealt with this. I think not quite everyone has dealt with it in the department. So basically, in terms of the proposed extensions, again, the inspector, I think, gave a number of very useful comments, and paragraphs 7 and 8 were, in particular, of the appeal decision, were very actually useful in actually guiding us, but also actually not heavily criticising us, saying that we had justified a harm. He didn't agree with us on that harm, but there is also criticism of the architect in terms of, I will quote directly from the inspector, that however there is some ambiguity given that the drawing for which approval is sought is annotated to include close boarding fence, unlike the previous approved drawing. So he wasn't necessarily shining a light on how wonderful the architecture was or the architect was, and recognised again in his cost decision, in refusing the grounds for costs, he did actually say we had justified the reasons for refusal, and whilst he hasn't agreed with our recommendations, did recognise that actually we had put forward a tenable planning case. And I think that's important, is as I say, is when we do put forward reasons for refusal, even as committee overturns, we make clear what that planning harm is, so that inspectors can be clear in how that has been judged. And as I say, the inspector has been very good in a number of those statements. So I encourage you to read those inspectors' decisions, not just the decision, but also the costs application. And very quickly, in terms of Pitmaston House, I will also highlight that's another long-standing case. As I say, key paragraphs there. If you want to, I would encourage you again to read paragraphs 13 and 14, which actually go to the nub of the actual case, which is, if you don't have management on site, how can you control the outdoor areas? How can you control the noise? And also, it's the role of the applicant to put those conditions in place so that then you can add conditions with confidence. And I think those are the nubs of it. As I say, there are a couple of other appeal decisions come through, one for 13 Lansdowne Road on highways and HMO, which might be interesting, which was allowed, and another one on 78 Ombudsleigh, which was refused, dismissed, which related to highway safety as well. So 4 interesting appeal decisions this month. I hope some more interesting ones come. And as I say, until the next time.
Andrew, thanks very much. I'm not going to suggest we have a massive debate on them, to be perfectly honest, but we appreciate you coming, because I think we do need to use these opportunities as learning opportunities, whether we win or lose, but we should learn from them. And I've already seen Councillor Amos's eyes light up at the idea that if you don't have on-site management, you can't manage it. But I can see that coming back at me, reference HMO in future, but never mind. Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate today. And we finished pretty well, I thought, 4:30, considering the time. I might get to Watford. See you.